Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
It's funny, the things you remember. I don't remember my first steps or my first word, but I remember the exact texture of the silk. It was a pale pastel, the color of a spring sunrise, and it whispered against my skin as I moved. That sound, that feeling, was the only thing that felt real in the suffocating quiet of my dorm room. My name is Ethan Carter, and at the time, I was a senior in college, studying psychology, a field I'd chosen, ironically, to try and understand the tangled mess of wiring in my own head. My roommate, Jake, was supposed to be gone for the weekend, a fact I had triple-checked. It was my window of opportunity, my time to breathe. On my desk, usually buried under textbooks about Freud and Jung, was a different kind of science, a collection of brushes, palettes, and tubes that held the power of transformation. A golden blonde wig sat on a styrofoam head, its synthetic strands catching the lamplight like a halo. And next to it, the dress. I started the ritual slowly, savoring each step. It began with shaving, a meticulous process that left my legs smooth and sensitive. Then came the thin layer of lotion, cool and fragrant. I pulled on a pair of sheer stockings, the delicate lace band gripping my thigh, a sensation that was both foreign and deeply comforting. Next was the corset. It wasn't a dramatic, Victorian-era piece, just a simple modern one meant to cinch my waist and create a hint of an hourglass shape. The compression was tight, a firm, constant embrace that somehow grounded me. It changed my posture, forcing my shoulders back, my chest out. It made me stand differently, feel differently in my own body. Finally, the dress. I stepped into it, pulling the silk up over my body. It flowed over my skin like cool water, settling around my frame in a way my usual jeans and t-shirts never could. The fabric had no weight, yet it felt more significant than anything I owned. I zipped it up the side, the small metallic sound echoing in the room. The wig was next. I carefully tucked my own short brown hair under a cap and settled the blonde wig into place. The change was instantaneous. The person looking back at me from the large mirror on my closet door was no longer just Ethan in a dress. The soft face-framing curls softened my jawline, changed the entire geometry of my face. I sat at my desk for the final, most crucial step, the makeup. My hands, which could be clumsy when fixing a leaky faucet or trying to play guitar, moved with a surgeon's precision. Foundation to smooth my skin, a soft blush to add warmth to my cheeks, a careful application of eyeshadow to make my eyes seem larger, more expressive, and last, the lipstick, a bold, classic red. As I painted it onto my lips, I felt a click, a final piece locking into place. I wasn't Ethan anymore. I was her. I leaned in close to the small makeup mirror on my desk, admiring the handiwork. The face staring back was gentle, her eyes full of a quiet confidence I'd never known. Her lips were curved in a slight, knowing smile. This was Evelyn. And that was when I heard it. The jingle of keys at the door. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. Jake! He was back early. My heart hammered against the corset, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My eyes darted around the room, a chaotic inventory of incriminating evidence. The dress, the wig, the makeup scattered across the desk. I had minutes, maybe seconds. I moved with a desperate, clumsy speed. I tore the wig from my head, tossing it into a storage bin under my bed. I kicked off the heels, wincing as they clattered against the floor. The dress was the hardest part. The zipper snagged. My breath hitched in a sob of pure terror. I yanked it, heard a faint tearing sound, and finally pulled the silk over my head, shoving it deep into the bin with the wig. I threw on a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie, the rough cotton a violent shock after the gentleness of the silk. I frantically wiped at my face with a makeup remover wipe, smearing the red lipstick across my cheek. The key turned in the lock. I swept the makeup from the desk into a drawer, the clatter of compacts and brushes sounding like an alarm. The door swung open. Jake stood there, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "Hey, man," he said, looking tired. "Coach ended practice early. Figured I'd just drive back tonight." I forced a smile, my heart still trying to beat its way out of my chest. "Oh, hey. Welcome back." My voice was a little too high, a little too shaky. He grunted, dropping his bag. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." He squinted at me. "And you've got something on your face." My hand flew to my cheek. Red. I'd missed a spot. "Oh, just a pen mark. You know, from studying." The lie felt thick and clumsy in my mouth. Jake just shrugged, already digging through his bag for his headphones. He hadn't noticed. The crisis was averted. The wave of relief that washed over me was so intense it made me dizzy. But as I sat there, my body trembling with leftover adrenaline, my eyes fell on the small makeup mirror still on the desk. I had forgotten to put it away. And in its reflection, angled just right, I could still see her, a ghost of a face, soft and gentle, with one perfectly painted red lip. Evelyn. In that moment, staring at that fragmented image, I didn't know what I was more afraid of, Jake discovering my secret, or the thought of never, ever being Evelyn again. I always told myself it was just a role, a character I was playing, a psychological exercise. But deep down, in a place I rarely dared to look, I knew that was a lie. Evelyn wasn't a character. She was a desperate, beautiful, and terrifying truth. A truth that was becoming harder and harder to hide, even from myself. And that fear was tied to another, deeper one, the thought of my father. My dad, Richard Carter, was a retired Navy captain. He was a man carved from granite and discipline. He believed in strength, order, and tradition. He despised what he called weirdos and deviants. The world, in his view, was black and white. Men were men, and women were women. Any deviation from that was a sign of weakness, a moral failing. If he ever found out about Evelyn, he wouldn't just be disappointed, he would see it as a stain on the family honor, a profound and unforgivable disgrace. The thought of his face, cold and unmoving with judgment, was a ghost that haunted every rustle of silk, every click of a lipstick tube. The close call with Jake left me shaken for weeks. Evelyn's things stayed locked in their bin, a silent, reproachful presence under my bed. I tried to throw myself into my studies, to be the diligent son, the normal college student. But the world felt dull, muted, like I was watching my life on a black and white television. The craving to feel the silk on my skin, to see her face in the mirror, was a constant, low-grade ache. I knew I couldn't do it in the dorm room again. It was too risky. I needed a safe space, a place where Evelyn could exist without the threat of exposure. My search led me to the less traveled corners of the internet, to forums and message boards I accessed with a shielded browser. That's where I found an announcement for an off-campus cosplay party. The theme was myths and monsters. It was perfect. In a crowd of people dressed as vampires, elves, and superheroes, a girl in a pretty dress wouldn't just be accepted. She would be anonymous. She would be a costume. The night of the party, I rented a cheap motel room a few towns over. It was dingy and smelled of stale cigarettes, but it felt like a sanctuary. I laid out Evelyn's things on the worn bedspread, my hands trembling slightly. This time felt different. This wasn't just for me in a locked room. I was taking her out into the world, The fear was immense, but the excitement was a powerful countercurrent. The transformation process was the same, but imbued with a new sense of purpose. The stockings, the corset, the dress this time, a deep sapphire blue that shimmered under the dim motel light, the blonde wig, the careful makeup. When I was done, Evelyn stared back at me from the mottled mirror above the dresser. She looked nervous, but determined. I took a deep breath, something that was always a little difficult in the corset, and walked out the door. The party was in the cavernous basement of a rented-out art gallery. The music was loud, the lights were low, and the air was thick with the smell of fog machines and cheap punch. I felt incredibly self-conscious, my every movement stiff and calculated. I was convinced everyone was staring, that they could see through the disguise to the terrified young man underneath. I found a dark corner and tried to blend into the shadows, nursing a plastic cup of soda. "That's a really elegant take on a siren," a voice said next to me. I jumped, nearly spilling my drink. A young woman with a cascade of curly black hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence was smiling at me. She was dressed as a steampunk mechanic, complete with brass goggles perched on her head and an assortment of whimsical gears and tools on her belt. "Oh, thank you," I managed to say. My voice came out as a breathy, feminine whisper, a voice I'd practiced for hours but had never used on another human being. "I'm Maya," she said, extending a hand. "Maya Lopez." "Evelyn," I replied, taking her hand. Her grip was firm, her skin warm. "Evelyn," she repeated, tasting the name. "It suits you. But you don't look like a monster. You look, well, you look like you—" She tilted her head, her gaze sharp and analytical. "It's in your eyes. Most people here, they're hiding behind a mask. But you, Evelyn, do you realize how different your eyes look when you see yourself in a mirror? It's like they're seeing home for the first time. That's real." Her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. She saw it. She saw me. Not the costume, not the character, but the truth of it. I was speechless, my carefully constructed defenses crumbling. Maya must have seen the panic on my face because her expression softened. "Hey, it's cool. I'm an art student. I notice details. And you, my dear, are a work of art." That was the beginning of it all. Maya became my guide, my mentor, my co-conspirator. She was fascinated by Evelyn, not in a clinical way, but with an artist's appreciation for beauty and authenticity. She never once made me feel strange or ashamed. To her, Evelyn was just another facet of the person she was getting to know. We started meeting regularly. She'd invite me over to her chaotic, paint-splattered apartment, and we'd spend hours transforming me. She taught me things I could never learn from online tutorials. She showed me how to use a touch of white eyeliner in the corner of my eye to make my gaze brighter, how to contour my cheeks to create a softer, more feminine shape. She made me try on different wigs, a sleek black bob, a fiery red shag, a soft natural brown to see how each one changed Evelyn's personality. "You see," she'd say, turning me toward the mirror, "this one makes you look mysterious. The blonde is more innocent. It's all about telling a story with your look." She taught me how to walk. We'd practice in her living room, me stumbling in a pair of heels while she'd laugh and say, "Lean back, shift your weight to your hips, let them sway, own the movement." She taught me how to modulate my voice, not just to make it higher, but to give it a softer cadence, a more melodic rhythm. With Maya's help, I started spending more and more time as Evelyn. Sometimes we'd just stay in her apartment, drinking tea and talking for hours. I'd write in a journal, but only as her, filling the pages with Evelyn's thoughts, her feelings, her experiences. Other times, We'd venture out. A quiet afternoon at a coffee shop in a different neighborhood. A walk through a museum on a weekday. Each outing was a small victory. A new piece of the world that Evelyn could claim as her own. Each time, I became her. It felt less like putting on a costume and more like shedding one. It felt like coming home. One afternoon, we were sitting on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by makeup palettes. She was teaching me how to do a perfect cat eye with liquid eyeliner. "Okay, hold still," she murmured, her face just inches from mine. Her hand was steady as she rested it on my cheek to brace herself. I could feel the warmth of her skin. Smell the faint, pleasant scent of turpentine and vanilla that always clung to her. Her dark eyes were focused, her breath a soft puff against my lips. My heart began to pound. A frantic, confusing rhythm. The proximity was overwhelming. I was intensely aware of her, of the intimacy of the moment. Was it Ethan who was feeling this dizzying pull toward the vibrant, brilliant girl in front of me, or was it Evelyn? The lines were blurring. The two identities I tried so hard to keep separate were bleeding into one another, and the feeling was both exhilarating and terrifying. I didn't know who was falling for Maya, but I knew, with a certainty that shook me to my core, that someone inside me was. "I'm having a small get-together at my friend's place on Saturday," Maya said one evening, dabbing a bit of gloss onto my lips. "It's not a cosplay thing. Just a party. For friends. A place where everyone can just be their true selves. I want you to come." The invitation sent a jolt of pure fear through me. As me, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "No, silly," she said, smiling at my reflection in the mirror. "I want Evelyn to come." The idea was terrifying. This wasn't a cosplay convention where I could hide behind a character concept. This was a real party, with real people. It felt like stepping off a cliff without a parachute. But looking at Maya's encouraging smile, I knew I had to do it. It was the next step, the next test. On Saturday night, I transformed in Maya's apartment. She had picked out the outfit for me, a stunning slip dress of jade green silk that fell in a shimmering column to my mid-calf, and a pair of delicate, silver high-heeled sandals. She insisted on minimal makeup. "Tonight isn't about hiding," she'd said. "It's about revealing." She styled the soft brown wig, the one that looked the most natural, into loose waves. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who looked elegant, understated, and incredibly nervous. We took a cab to the party, which was in a spacious loft apartment overlooking the city. The lights were low. The music was a cool, ambient jazz, and the air hummed with conversation and laughter. Maya took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Ready," she whispered. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She led me into the room, and what I saw amazed me. It was a kaleidoscope of humanity. People of all genders, all styles, all expressions, mingling and talking. No one stared. No one pointed. I saw a man in a full suit and tie talking to someone in a flowing floral gown who had a full, glorious beard. I saw two women who looked like punk rockers laughing with a guy in a bright pink jumpsuit. It was exactly what Maya had promised, a place where everyone was simply themselves. Slowly, the knot of fear in my stomach began to loosen. Maya introduced me to her friends, simply saying, "This is my friend, Evelyn," and they would smile and say, "Nice to meet you, Evelyn." They used she and her without a second thought. Each correct pronoun felt like a gift, a small, perfect validation that settled deep in my soul. For the first time, Evelyn wasn't an act. She was a person in a room full of other people. A man with kind eyes and silver hair asked me to dance. It was a slow song, and my heart hammered with anxiety as he led me to the small makeshift dance floor. I stumbled at first, unused to moving so publicly in heels, but he was patient. "Just relax," he said with a gentle smile. "Follow the music." I closed my eyes, took a breath, and let my body move. The silk of the dress swirled around my legs. The heels gave a subtle swing to my hips, and for a few minutes, I wasn't thinking. I was just feeling. I was dancing, and I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. Later, Maya and I found our way to a balcony that overlooked the city skyline. The night air was cool, a welcome relief from the warmth of the party. The city lights spread out before us like a carpet of fallen stars. I leaned against the railing, the cool metal a stark contrast to the warmth radiating from my own skin. I felt alive, buzzing with a kind of peaceful energy I had never known. "You were amazing in there," Maya said softly, standing beside me. I was terrified, I admitted, my voice husky with emotion. "I know, but you did it. You walked into a room as yourself, and you shone." We stood in comfortable silence for a long time, just watching the distant traffic move like blood cells through the city's arteries. The cool breeze played with a stray strand of my wig, and I felt a strange sense of permanence, as if this moment could stretch on forever. The city lights reflected in my glossy lips, in the silver of my shoes, in the shimmering green of my dress, every step I had taken tonight. Every polite nod, every shared laugh, felt like I was stepping into my own life for the very first time. The party eventually wound down. Instead of going straight home, Maya suggested we walk to a smalls and all-night park with a lake at its center. We sat on a cold stone bench, the water before us a dark, placid mirror reflecting the moon. The sounds of the city were distant now, a low, constant hum. "Thank you, Maya," I said, my voice thick. "For everything. For seeing me." She turned to look at me, her expression serious in the moonlight. She reached out and tucked the stray piece of hair back into place. Her fingers brushed against my cheek, and a shiver ran through me. "Evelyn," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you don't have to pretend anymore. With me, with yourself. It's not a game. You're real." And that's when the tears came. They weren't tears of fear or shame, like the ones that had threatened me in my dorm room. These were tears of release, of overwhelming gratitude and a profound, aching sense of being found. A sob escaped my lips, a sound that was raw and ugly and utterly human. I had spent so long building walls, hiding this essential part of myself, convinced that it was something monstrous and wrong. And here was this incredible person, looking at me with nothing but acceptance, telling me that the person I was so afraid of being was real, and that it was okay. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore, my head resting on Maya's shoulder, her arm wrapped securely around me, holding the shattered pieces of me together under the quiet, watchful eye of the moon, of the Kyetzum. The week after the party was a blissful haze. I felt lighter, more confident. The wall between Ethan and Evelyn had begun to dissolve. I found myself adopting some of Evelyn's mannerisms, even when I was dressed as Ethan, a more graceful way of moving my hands, a softer tone in my voice. It wasn't conscious. It was integration. For the first time, I felt like I was becoming a whole person. Then the phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was strained, brittle. "Ethan, honey, you need to come home. It's your father." The world tilted on its axis. "What happened? Is he okay?" "He had a stroke," she said, her voice cracking. "It was a mild one. The doctors say he's stable, but he's going to need us. Can you come home?" "Of course," I said, my mind already racing. "I'll pack a bag. I'll be on the first bus in the morning." The call ended, and the silence in my room felt heavy, suffocating. My father, the granite man. The thought of him being weak, vulnerable, was inconceivable. And beneath the worry, a cold dread began to seep into my bones. I had to go home, back to the house where Ethan Carter was molded and defined, back to the place where Evelyn could not, under any circumstances, exist. I called Maya, my voice shaking as I explained what happened. She listened patiently, making soft, comforting sounds. We met for a quick, somber coffee before I had to leave. "I'm so scared. Maya," I confessed, stirring my untouched latte, going back there. "It feels like stepping back into a cage." She reached across the table and took my hand. In her other hand, she held a small, delicate silver chain. Hanging from it was a tiny, locket-sized mirror. "I want you to have this," she said, her dark eyes serious. "If you feel scared, or lost, or like you're forgetting who you are, just look in this mirror. Evelyn is always with you. She's not just the clothes or the makeup. She's in here." She tapped her finger against my heart. "Don't let anyone, not even your father, make you forget that." I allowed her to fasten the necklace around my neck. The small mirror felt cool against my skin, a secret anchor in a turbulent sea. The bus ride home was a long, bleak journey through my own anxieties. The house was just as I remembered it, but shrouded in a new, heavy silence. My father was home from the hospital, resting in his favorite armchair in the living room. He looked smaller, paler. The stroke had affected his left side, and his speech was slightly slurred. But his eyes were the same. Sharp, critical, and demanding. He still radiated an aura of uncompromising authority, even in his weakened state. My mother, Sarah, fluttered around him, her face etched with worry. She was a kind, gentle woman who had long ago learned to navigate her husband's rigid personality by making herself smaller, quieter. She hugged me tightly, her relief at my presence palpable. The days fell into a grueling routine, helping my father with his physical therapy exercises, making meals, cleaning the house. I was playing the part of the dutiful son, a role I knew well. The necklace from Maya stayed hidden under my shirt, its presence a small, constant comfort. In my old childhood bedroom, surrounded by baseball trophies and dusty model airplanes, I felt the ghost of Evelyn more acutely than ever. I had packed her away in a locked suitcase, a desperate act of compartmentalization. The suitcase was a bomb, a secret that could destroy the fragile peace of this house. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. The pressure, the silence, the constant performance of being the son my father expected, it was crushing me. My parents were asleep. The house was dark. I quietly unlocked the suitcase. My hands trembled as I pulled out a simple silk nightgown. I didn't do the full transformation. No wig, no makeup. I just needed to feel the fabric against my skin. I slipped off my t-shirt and jeans and let the cool, smooth silk slide over my body. It was like a drink of water after days in the desert. I went to the mirror, the same one I'd stared into as a teenager, trying to find a man I recognized. And I just looked. It was a strange, hybrid image, my short hair, my masculine face, but the soft, feminine drape of the gown. And in that moment, I felt a flicker of peace. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. My blood ran cold. I froze, my eyes locked on my own reflection. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw a sliver of my mother's floral bathrobe as she walked past on her way to the bathroom. She paused for a fraction of a second. I don't know what she saw. Maybe just a strange silhouette. A trick of the light. but she stopped. And then, after a heart-stopping moment of silence, she continued down the hall. I scrambled out of the nightgown, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I shoved it back in the suitcase, locked it, and slid it deep under my bed. I lay in the dark for hours, wide awake, listening to the frantic beating of my own heart. She had seen something. I didn't know how much, but I knew she had seen. And the next day, her silence was the loudest sound in the house. The following day was excruciating. My mother was polite, but distant. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Every shared glance was fraught with unspoken questions. The air between us was thick with things I couldn't say and things I was terrified for her to ask. My father, oblivious, continued his gruff reign from his armchair, creating a second layer of tension that made the house feel like a pressure cooker. That afternoon, she found me in the backyard, aimlessly weeding the small garden she tended with such care. She came out with 2 glasses of iced tea, her movements slow and deliberate. She handed one to me, then sat on the small stone bench. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said, her voice soft but firm. My stomach plummeted. This was it. "Okay," I managed to say, my own voice sounding thin and weak. She took a slow sip of her tea, gathering her thoughts. "Last night," she began, her eyes fixed on the rose bushes. "I saw you. In your room. Through the door. I just saw a shape and a reflection in the mirror." She finally turned to look at me, her gaze gentle but searching. "Who were you? Honey, who was that in the mirror?" The question was so direct, so devoid of judgment, that it disarmed me completely. I could have lied. I could have made up some story. But looking into my mother's worried face, I knew I couldn't. The lie was too heavy to carry anymore. Tears welled in my eyes. My carefully constructed walls came crashing down. "I don't know," I whispered, the words choked with a sob. "I don't know who she is. Mom. But her name is Evelyn. And when I'm her, I feel peaceful. I feel right. Like I can finally breathe." The confession hung in the air between us. My mother's eyes filled with tears, a mix of confusion and a pain that I had caused. I expected yelling, or disgust, or a lecture. Instead, she set down her glass, moved closer, and wrapped her arms around my trembling shoulders. "Oh, Ethan," she wept softly into my hair. "My sweet boy. I don't understand. I don't understand any of it." She pulled back, her hands framing my face, wiping away my tears with her thumbs. "But if that's what makes you happy, if she makes you feel peaceful, then I think I want to meet Evelyn. I want to meet the person who makes my child feel like they can breathe." Her acceptance was a shock to my system, a profound act of love that left me breathless. It was one thing to be accepted by Maya in her vibrant, open world. It was another thing entirely to be seen by my own mother in the heart of the home that had always demanded I be someone else. That evening, after my father was asleep, my mother came to my room. "Is now a good time?" she asked softly. I nodded, my heart pounding with a new kind of fear, the fear of being truly seen. I pulled the suitcase out from under the bed. My hands were shaking so violently, I could barely work the combination lock. The transformation was unlike any other I had experienced. It wasn't joyful or secretive. It was a sacred, terrifying, and deeply emotional ritual. My mother sat on the edge of my bed, watching in silence. I laid out the makeup, the wig. The dress I had chosen a simple, elegant navy blue one, My hands shook as I applied the foundation. My vision blurred with tears, causing the mascara to smudge. I had to stop and take a deep, shuddering breath before I could draw the line of lipstick on my trembling mouth. Each step was an act of faith. A prayer that the person on the other side would be worth this gut-wrenching vulnerability. When the makeup was done and the wig was in place, I stood up and stepped into the dress. My mother helped me with the zipper on the back. Her fingers were cool against my skin. I turned to face her. The room was silent except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. My mother looked at me, her eyes tracing the lines of Evelyn's face. She took in the soft brown hair, the carefully made-up eyes, the gentle curve of the dress. A slow smile spread across her face, a smile of wonder and dawning recognition. She reached out and took my hand. Evelyn's hand. "Oh," she breathed, her voice filled with a quiet awe. "You're beautiful." She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with tears, but not of sadness. "Hello, Evelyn. It's so nice to finally meet you. I think I've had a daughter all this time, and I never even knew it." My mother became my silent ally in the house. We never spoke of Evelyn when my father was awake, but a new understanding flowed between us. She would ask quiet questions when we were alone, not out of suspicion, but genuine curiosity. Does Evelyn like tea or coffee? What kind of music does she listen to? It was her way of getting to know this new person who was also her child. She was the one who told my father. I don't know what she said or how she said it. All I know is that for 2 full days after their conversation, my father did not speak to me. He didn't look at me. He would ask my mother to pass him things, even if I was sitting closer. The silence was a weapon, a cold, heavy blanket of disapproval that suffocated the entire house. It was worse than yelling. It was a complete and total erasure of my existence. On the evening of the second day, he called me into the living room. He had turned off the television. The room was unnaturally quiet. He sat in his armchair, a judge on his throne. "Your mother told me," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, "about your hobby." I stood before him, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "It's not a hobby," I said, my own voice shaking. He ignored me. "I raised you to be a man. I taught you to be strong, to be disciplined. And this," he waved a dismissive hand, "this is, what? Some kind of joke. A sickness." The words were like stones, each one a painful blow. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to explain the peace Evelyn brought me. But I knew it would be useless. He wouldn't hear it. So I fell back on the only thing I had left, the simple, unadorned truth. "This is me." "Dad," I said, my voice cracking but clear. "This is me." He stared at me for a long, heavy moment. His jaw worked silently. I could see a storm of emotions in his eyes, anger, confusion, but beneath it all, a flicker of something I couldn't name. Pain fear. He finally let out a long, slow sigh. The sound of a man defeated by something he could not comprehend. "I don't understand it," he said, his voice raspy. "I never will, but I don't want to lose my child." The admission seemed to cost him a great deal. He looked away, out the window into the encroaching darkness. Then, he said the words that made my blood run cold. "Your mother said her name is Evelyn. I want to meet her, just once." The request was not an olive branch. It felt like a demand. A summons. He wasn't asking to understand. He was asking to inspect the evidence of my failure. But it was also the only path forward. The next evening, with my mother's quiet, supportive presence, I began the transformation. My hands were steady this time. my movements filled with a grim determination. This was not for me. This was not for pleasure or for peace. This was for him, a final desperate attempt to bridge an impossible chasm. I chose my most conservative outfit, a simple, high-necked white dress that fell below the knee. I used the natural brown wig. Styled simply, the makeup was minimal, just enough to soften my features, not to create a glamorous illusion. I wanted him to see me, not a character. When I was ready, my mother squeezed my hand one last time. "You are strong," she whispered. "Evelyn is strong." I took a deep breath and walked into the living room. He was sitting in his chair, exactly as before. He didn't move as I entered. He just watched me. His face an unreadable mask. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each second a hammer blow against my nerves. I stood there, under his intense, silent scrutiny, feeling completely exposed, my entire being laid bare for his judgment. Finally, after several long, agonizing minutes, he spoke. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I see your mother's eyes," he said, his gaze fixed on my face. "In you, I see her eyes." And then he turned away, looking back out the window as if I were no longer there. The audience was over. I stood frozen for a moment, the meaning of his words washing over me. It wasn't acceptance, it wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. It was a connection, a single, fragile thread of recognition in a sea of confusion. He had looked at the face of Evelyn and seen a piece of the woman he loved. He had seen family. I turned and walked back to my room. Closing the door behind me, I leaned against it, and the tears I had been holding back finally came. They were tears of pain, of relief, of a sorrow so deep I couldn't give it a name. I didn't know if anything had been fixed, but something had shifted. A crack had appeared in the granite, and for the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of hope that my father might not be entirely lost to me after all. A year can change everything. I graduated, moved out of my parents' house, and found a small apartment in the city, not far from Maya. The move was more than just a change of address. It was a declaration of independence. It was me choosing to build a life where all the pieces of myself could coexist. I found a job as a counselor at a local community center. My studies in psychology, which had begun as a desperate attempt to diagnose my own supposed brokenness, had transformed into a tool to help others navigate their own complex inner worlds. I was good at it. I could listen without judgment, because I knew what it felt like to carry a secret you were sure would make you unlovable. In the closet of my new apartment, a row of sensible button-down shirts and slacks hung on one side. On the other, a collection of silk, cotton, and lace dresses hung in a vibrant array of colors. A pair of men's dress shoes sat on the floor next to a pair of elegant heels. There was no longer a locked suitcase. There was no longer a hidden bin. There was just a wardrobe, belonging to one person. The line between Ethan and Evelyn, once a stark, heavily policed border, had softened into a gentle, permeable membrane. Some days, I went to work as Ethan, the empathetic counselor with a kind smile. On other days, especially when meeting with clients I knew would be more comfortable with a feminine presence, I would go to work as Evelyn. Maya had helped me find a professional, stylish look for her blouses, pencil skirts, and low, practical heels. She wasn't just a creature of the night anymore. She was a woman who went to work, paid her bills, and met her friends for coffee. My relationship with Maya had blossomed into something beautiful and undefined. We were best friends, confidants, and sometimes something more. There were nights we'd spend together, where the lines of identity and affection would blur into a warm, comforting intimacy that needed no labels. She loved Ethan, and she loved Evelyn. She loved the person I was, in all my facets. My parents and I were learning a new kind of language. My father never mentioned Evelyn again, but something in his tone had changed. The harsh, critical edge was gone, replaced by a quiet, sometimes awkward, effort. He would ask about my job. He would tell me he was proud of my degree. They were small things, but they were more than I'd ever had before. My mother was my staunchest supporter. We talked on the phone every week. Sometimes I would be Ethan, other times Evelyn. She never flinched. She learned to ask, "Who am I speaking with today, dear?" and would seamlessly adjust her conversation. She sent me a beautiful scarf for my birthday, one that she said would look lovely on either of you. One sunny afternoon, I sat down to write them a letter. I told them about my work, about my apartment, about a funny movie Maya and I had seen. As I got to the end, I paused, pen hovering over the paper, for so long. My sign-off had been a source of anxiety, a choice between two identities, but it wasn't a choice anymore. I wrote, "With all my love, your child, Evelyn." I sealed the envelope, a feeling of profound peace settling over me. It wasn't a rejection of Ethan. It was an embrace of the whole. Evelyn was the name for the part of me I had fought so hard to accept. The part that had ultimately led me to a more authentic life. She had become the symbol of my integration. Later that day, I was heading out to meet Maya. The sun was warm on my face. I was dressed in a simple sundress, my brown hair, my real hair, which I had started to grow out caught in the breeze as I locked my apartment door. My fingers brushed against the small silver locket Maya had given me, which I still wore every day. I paused and lifted it, tilting the tiny mirror to catch the light. A face looked back at me. It wasn't the fractured, terrified reflection from my dorm room mirror. It wasn't the hyper-feminine, glamorous creation of my early experiments. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't Evelyn. It was just me. And for the first time, I was smiling. Not a practiced, painted-on smile, but a genuine, peaceful smile of a person who was finally, completely, at home in their own skin. The reflection was no longer divided. It was one.